Nicole Kidman has filed for divorce from Keith Urban after 19 years of marriage. The court papers show the actress will remain the primary caregiver of the couple's teenage daughters.
Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were once Hollywood's golden couple. Their love story seemed pulled straight from a fairy tale. Two Australians who had conquered the world in their own ways, coming together in what looked like the perfect marriage. On the red carpet, they appeared inseparable, all smiles and gentle touches. In interviews, they spoke with deep affection, leaving fans convinced they were one of the rare Hollywood romances destined to last a lifetime. But now, at 58, Nicole Kidman has finally broken her silence, admitting the real reason behind her painful divorce from Keith Urban. Her confession has stunned fans worldwide, not just because of the heartbreak it reveals, but because it shatters the carefully crafted image of their marriage that so many admired. What could have gone so wrong between two people who seemed so deeply in love? Was it fame, pressure, personal struggles, or something even darker that drove them apart? This is the untold story of Nicole Kidman's marriage to Keith Urban. The passion, the challenges, and the tragic truth she has only now decided to reveal. When Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban first met in 2005, the world collectively sighed at what seemed like the beginning of a true fairy tale. Nicole had just endured a very public and emotionally draining divorce from Tom Cruise in 2001, a split that left her both vulnerable and wary of love in Hollywood. At the same time, Keith Urban was making waves in the country music scene, earning praise as one of Australia's brightest exports. When their paths crossed at a gala in Los Angeles, sparks flew instantly. At least that's how the story has always been told. For Nicole, Keith represented something she desperately needed: stability. After years of intense scrutiny in her marriage to Cruise, filled with rumors, controversies, and the immense pressure of being part of a Hollywood power couple, she longed for someone who could ground her. Keith, with his southern charm, musical talent, and seemingly humble nature, was everything Nicole thought she wanted. He wasn't just a celebrity. He was a man who shared her Australian roots and seemed to understand her in a way few others could. Their relationship progressed quickly, surprising even close friends. Within a year of meeting, they were married in a lavish ceremony in Sydney in June 2006. The media swarmed the event, declaring them Hollywood's new golden couple. Nicole glowed in her bridal gown, while Keith looked like a man who had finally found his soulmate. Together, they embodied a dream romance, talented, beautiful, and unshakably in love. From the beginning, they leaned into this image. On red carpets, they were affectionate and playful, often whispering to each other and holding hands as though no one else in the world existed. In interviews, Nicole would describe Keith as her rock, while Keith gushed about how Nicole was his inspiration, his muse, and the reason he stayed grounded despite fame's temptations. Fans believed it too. After all, this was Nicole Kidman, an Oscar-winning actress known for her elegance and grace, and Keith Urban, a charismatic musician adored by millions. Their pairing felt perfect, almost too good to be true. Behind the glamour, however, small cracks began to form. Keith Urban was open about his struggles with addiction, a battle that had haunted him for years. Nicole knew about his past, but believed love and commitment could help him overcome it. Just months into their marriage, Keith entered rehab after what he later admitted was a relapse. Nicole stood firmly by his side, showing unwavering support and insisting that they would weather the storm together. To the public, this only deepened their appeal. Here was a couple who not only shared joy, but also endured hardship with strength and loyalty. Their union also marked a new chapter for Nicole as a mother. Having adopted 2 children with Tom Cruise, she was now eager to build a family with Keith. In 2008, the couple welcomed their first daughter, Sunday Rose, followed by Faith Margaret in 2010. Nicole often spoke about how motherhood grounded her. While Keith credited his family with giving his life new meaning, it seemed like the perfect balance: career success, a strong marriage, and a growing family. But as years passed, whispers began to emerge. Fans and tabloids speculated about the pressures their marriage faced. Long stretches apart due to filming and touring, the burden of maintaining a flawless public image, and Keith's ongoing battle with sobriety. Yet Nicole and Keith dismissed the rumors, presenting a united front at every public appearance. Their laughter, their smiles, their affectionate gestures, everything suggested a marriage built on trust and love. For a time, the illusion held. They became symbols of resilience, proof that love could survive fame, personal struggles, and the relentless spotlight of Hollywood. But what the world didn't see, or perhaps didn't want to see, was that beneath the perfect image, unresolved issues were quietly pulling them apart. What began as a fairy tale romance was slowly becoming something much more complicated. Nicole Kidman, who had always craved stability and authenticity, began to question whether the marriage she fought so hard to preserve was truly what it seemed. And Keith, despite his deep love for her, carried battles that neither fame nor family could completely heal. It was the beginning of a journey that would test them both, and eventually lead Nicole to reveal the heartbreaking truth that she had kept hidden for years. From the outside, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban's marriage continued to shine. Red carpets, award shows, and magazine covers showed them locked in each other's arms, smiling as though they had conquered every obstacle. Yet behind those smiles, the reality of their relationship was far more complicated. What the world saw was only a carefully managed surface. What Nicole experienced privately was the weight of cracks that had begun to spread through the foundation of their marriage. One of the biggest challenges came from Keith's battle with addiction. Just months after their wedding, Keith shocked fans by checking into rehab for alcohol abuse. Nicole, standing firmly by his side, encouraged him to seek treatment and vowed to support him no matter how difficult it became. Publicly, she was hailed as the devoted wife who wouldn't abandon her husband in his darkest hour. But privately, it took a toll. Nicole had spent much of her life in turbulent relationships, and the last thing she wanted was to relive chaos and instability. She longed for a partner who could offer consistency and safety, qualities that Keith, despite his best efforts, sometimes struggled to provide. Their demanding careers added even more strain. Nicole was at the peak of her career, taking on demanding film roles that often kept her away for months at a time. Meanwhile, Keith was constantly on the road touring, with a schedule that left little room for family. The couple often found themselves living parallel lives, two people in love, but rarely in the same place long enough to nurture their bond. While some couples thrive in long-distance arrangements, Nicole and Keith's marriage began to feel more like a series of reunions than a partnership. This emotional distance was compounded by their different lifestyles and personalities. Nicole, elegant and reserved, valued privacy and quiet moments. Keith, with his outgoing, charming, and often unpredictable personality, thrived in the limelight of concerts and fan interactions. For a while, their differences were a source of attraction, balancing each other out. But as years went on, those differences began to create friction. Nicole sometimes felt overshadowed by Keith's lifestyle, while Keith felt pressure to live up to the image of the perfect husband she wanted to project. Another challenge came from their constant exposure to public scrutiny. Every gesture, every expression, every absence from an event was picked apart by tabloids. If Nicole attended a premiere without Keith, rumors of trouble in paradise swirled. If Keith was photographed alone at a party or concert, speculation grew about cracks in their marriage. While Nicole tried to block out the noise, she couldn't ignore the strain it placed on her sense of stability. After her painful divorce from Tom Cruise, she had hoped this marriage would give her peace. But instead, it sometimes felt like living under a microscope all over again. Even parenthood, which should have been a uniting force, became a source of tension. Nicole adored her two daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, and often prioritized spending time with them. Keith, while a loving father, had to juggle the demands of his music career, which frequently took him away from home. Nicole sometimes felt like she was carrying the emotional weight of the family on her own. And though she rarely admitted it publicly, the isolation of being both mother and wife to a man, often absent, wore her down. As the years went by, the cracks became harder to ignore. Nicole, known for her poise and composure, began to feel trapped in the image of a perfect marriage that no longer reflected her reality. She had worked tirelessly to support Keith, to stand by him in his struggles, and to keep their family intact. But deep inside, she was beginning to feel the same loneliness that haunted her during her years with Tom Cruise. The heartbreaking truth was that Nicole Kidman, despite her success, beauty, and fame, still longed for something that continued to slip through her fingers: emotional security. For Keith, the pressure was equally heavy. He loved Nicole deeply, but he couldn't always escape the demons that had followed him for years. Balancing his career, his sobriety, and the expectations of being married to one of the most famous women in the world was a burden he couldn't always carry with ease. He wanted to be the man she needed, but the cracks in their marriage were becoming undeniable. It was in these private struggles, hidden behind red carpet smiles, that Nicole began to realize her marriage was no longer the dream she thought it would be. And the more she tried to hold it together, the more she came to terms with a painful truth. Love, no matter how strong, sometimes isn't enough. By the late 2010s, the tension between Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban had reached a point where it could no longer be ignored. What began as small cracks had widened into a chasm, and the couple, once seen as unshakably united, was privately struggling to keep their marriage afloat. For Nicole, the breaking point was not just about Keith's addiction struggles or their conflicting careers. It was about the growing realization that she was living in a marriage where she no longer felt fulfilled. She had entered the relationship seeking stability, companionship, and a love that would heal the scars of her past. But instead, she often found herself battling feelings of loneliness, even while standing next to her husband on a red carpet filled with flashing cameras. Sources close to the couple revealed that the years of emotional distance, coupled with Keith's demanding career, had left Nicole feeling abandoned. Despite her unwavering support during his stints in rehab, Nicole often felt that her loyalty and sacrifice weren't reciprocated in the way she needed. It wasn't about material things. Nicole had her own wealth and independence. It was about emotional presence. She wanted a partner who could be fully there with her, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. On Keith's side, the pressures of being married to Nicole Kidman brought their own challenges. While he adored his wife, he often felt overshadowed by her immense fame and global recognition. Nicole was not only an Academy Award-winning actress, but also a woman admired worldwide for her elegance and resilience. For Keith, who had his own career insecurities and personal demons, the weight of living up to the perfect husband image became suffocating. At times, this led him back into cycles of anxiety and temptation, fueling the very struggles that drove them apart. The breaking point came when their ability to compromise began to collapse. Nicole, who once believed love could conquer anything, realized that her marriage was demanding sacrifices that chipped away at her happiness. The endless traveling, the solo parenting, and the effort to maintain the facade of a flawless marriage became unbearable. To her, it felt as though she was pouring everything into a relationship that left her drained. Keith, too, reached a place of exhaustion. He could no longer balance the demands of his career, his sobriety, and the weight of Nicole's expectations. While he loved her deeply, he admitted to friends that he sometimes felt like he wasn't enough for her, that no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't give her the stability she craved. The couple who once seemed like soulmates now found themselves living in different emotional worlds. Their children, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, became the couple's primary focus. Both Nicole and Keith worked hard to shield their daughters from the cracks in their marriage, maintaining family traditions and trying to preserve a sense of normalcy. But even children can sense tension, and the strain within the household was undeniable. Nicole, a devoted mother, wanted her daughters to grow up in an environment of peace and security, not one overshadowed by conflict and absence. By this point, Nicole had begun confiding in close friends about her doubts. While she still spoke fondly of Keith in interviews, the reality was far more complicated. Privately, she admitted to feeling trapped, torn between her love for him and her own need for happiness. After years of standing by her husband, supporting him through his struggles and keeping their family together, Nicole began to realize that sometimes love isn't enough to fix what is broken. The breaking point wasn't marked by a single explosive fight or scandal. It was quieter than that. It was in the silence of empty homes while Keith was on tour. It was in the exhaustion of raising children largely on her own. It was in the loneliness of watching her marriage slowly unravel despite her best efforts. Nicole Kidman, who had endured so much in her personal life, was forced to face the hardest truth of all. Her marriage to Keith Urban was no longer sustainable. It was then, in moments of quiet reflection, that Nicole began preparing herself for the painful decision she had long avoided. A decision that would not only shock fans but also redefine her own path forward. The fairy tale romance that once captivated the world had come to an end, and Nicole was finally ready to admit why. For Nicole Kidman, divorce was never part of the dream she once envisioned for herself. She had always believed in lasting love and building a family rooted in stability. But at 58, as she finally admitted why her marriage to Keith Urban ended, she spoke with a quiet honesty that revealed both the sorrow and the strength that defined her journey. Divorce, she confessed, was not a sudden decision, but a long and painful realization that the bond they shared, though deeply meaningful, could no longer sustain the weight of their very different lives. Fame, demanding schedules, and unhealed personal struggles had created cracks that love alone could not repair. Even in the wake of heartbreak, Nicole has been careful not to let bitterness shape her narrative. She acknowledges the joy Keith brought into her life and the moments they shared as partners. In interviews, she reflects on their time together as valuable and transformative, emphasizing that not all relationships are meant to last forever, but that doesn't mean they fail. Instead, they teach, they shape, and they prepare us for the next chapter. Nicole's ability to speak of her past with grace and compassion shows the remarkable resilience she has cultivated over the years, not just as an actress, but as a woman who has endured loss, public scrutiny, and personal reinvention. Her career, too, became a healing ground after the separation. Nicole threw herself into her work, channeling her emotions into roles that mirrored her own struggles and triumphs. Audiences noticed how much depth she brought to her characters, as though each performance carried pieces of her truth. It wasn't just acting, it was survival, a way of reclaiming her voice and reminding the world that heartbreak does not define a person's worth. In fact, many critics consider this later period in her career among her strongest because she was no longer just performing, she was living through the art she created. Beyond Hollywood, Nicole's greatest source of strength has been her family. She has often said that her children give her the courage to face life's hardest chapters. Motherhood became her anchor, reminding her of the importance of stability, compassion, and perseverance. Instead of shielding them from her struggles, she chose to model resilience, to show them that even when life falls apart, it is possible to rebuild with dignity. To Nicole, that became her greatest role. Not just an Academy Award-winning actress, but a mother who stood strong in the face of heartbreak. Now, at 58, Nicole radiates a sense of peace that comes from acceptance. She no longer hides the truth of why her marriage ended, nor does she dwell in regret. Instead, she embraces the idea that endings can also be beginnings, doors closing so that others may open. Her decision to walk away from Keith Urban was not about weakness, but about courage. The courage to acknowledge when love is no longer enough and to choose self-respect over silence. Today, Nicole is celebrated not only for her artistry but also for her authenticity. She has become a symbol of resilience for countless women who have endured similar struggles, showing that even the most painful endings can lead to empowerment. She continues to work, to inspire, and to live with a spirit unbroken by the trials of her past. Nicole Kidman's story reminds us all of a profound truth. Life is not defined by the losses we endure, but by the way we rise from them. For Nicole, divorce was not the end of her story, but the turning point that shaped her into the strong, graceful woman the world sees today. And perhaps that is her greatest triumph, not the films, not the awards, but the courage to keep moving forward with grace.